successful stint at mediation between long-time arch-rivals Saudi Arabia and Iran has now encouraged the country to test its influence further. It has already proposed to engage in tensions between Israel and Palestine. And now its focus is on the war in Ukraine. The Chinese leader Xi Jinping has been in touch with his Ukrainian counterpart and has also met President Putin twice in the last 6 months. Last February, China presented a 12-point solution paper coinciding after 1 year of the war. While the West largely rejected the position of China on this paper, Moscow and Kiev said they were open to it. 3 months on, top Chinese envoy is now embarking on a trip to Ukraine, Russia and even other European countries. Beijing's special representative for Eurasian affairs and former ambassador to Russia, Li Hui, has kicked off his 5-nation trip this week. His first stop is Kiev, followed by Warsaw, Paris, Berlin and then Moscow. This is, of course, as per initial reports, although China is just one of the handful countries which sent representatives to both countries. It remains to be seen how Li can help facilitate China's role as a possible mediator between Kiev and Moscow, especially in the light of Western countries' concerns over Beijing's stance on this conflict. The Chinese Foreign Ministry is already touting this trip to project itself as the promoter of global peace. Let's also listen in to some reactions.
Regarding the visit by Special Representative of the Chinese government for Eurasian affairs, Ambassador Li Hui, to 5 countries, Ukraine, Poland, France, Germany and Russia, we have already released and introduced relevant information regarding the visit. As for the specific details of the visit, we will release the news in a timely manner. Everyone please stay tuned. China will continue to work together with the international community to play a constructive role in a political settlement to the Ukraine crisis.
We all know that both countries are facing a lot of tension, whether it's Ukraine and Russia. What will the prospect of Chinese intervention mean for this war? Let's try and get in a sense of perspective, especially from China. And I'm joined in by Andrew K.P. Lung, who's an international and independent China strategist, joining me live from Hong Kong. Many thanks to you, Mr. Lung, for joining in. Now, as we all know, China's special representative for Eurasian affairs, Li Hui, is visiting at a time when Ukraine is already geared for a fierce counter-offensive to regain territory occupied by Russia. Also, Russia is escalating its attacks, especially on Kiev, something that we've already been talking about and have also focused today. How can Beijing help at such a tense moment in this war?
Well, of course, China, as a possible peace negotiator, has got to choose the time very carefully. When the war started, China was not in any position to act as mediator because the two sides are locking horns together. Neither side wanted a peace. But now it's over 14 months, and then both sides are getting a little bit tired. Not only both sides are getting a bit tired, but the rest of the world is also worried about the disruption of supply and value chains, inflation, and so on and so forth. Particularly the United States itself is feeling the pinch in terms of inflation, in terms of having to increase interest rates, rattling the economy at the time when the next presidential election is coming up in the United States. So the time is right for China to broker a peace in the light of China's close relationship with Russia, even though China does not side with Russia entirely on the war, because China respects and holds dear the international charter of the United Nations.
Right.
So I think that anyway, yeah.
Mr. Lung, we know China is buoyed by its recent diplomatic win in the Gulf between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But what are the challenges for Beijing while mediating this war, especially when Kiev has ruled out the idea of any territorial concessions to Russia? We know that peace mediation in a war is going to be far more different.
Well, at the end of the day, I don't think it's likely that the United States, along with its Western allies, would be able to topple the Russian government, because after 14 months, that's not going to happen. Likewise, the original idea that Russia would totally surrender is not realistic. So most sides could hope for is some sort of a ceasefire without recognizing any kind of sovereignty on the part of course, Ukraine and on the part of the West. But a ceasefire is possible. For example, in the past included, for example, the war in Korea, and even now, both South Korea and North Korea are supposed to be at war, but now that there is no war because of the armistice. So a ceasefire is a very good way to stop further escalation of the war, so that both sides could consolidate. And what the Ukraine wants is to rebuild this country. What Russia wants also is stopping the track and safeguarding what it also already has achieved on the ground.
Right. All right. Mr. Lang, there's a lot that we want to discuss, but for the benefit of my viewer, let me also run them through what the situation is like in Ukraine and in Russia both. I'll come back to you for more, because right now in Ukraine, the war is intensifying as the nation prepares for its much anticipated counteroffensive. Russia is grounding and pounding Kiev with hypersonic missiles, which has been described as quote-unquote exceptional in density. According to Ukrainian officials, Russia has launched a total number of 18 missiles, all of which have been shot down in a spectacular yet scary light show in Kiev's night sky. An unusually high number of loud explosions were heard in the city center as authorities informed the residents that the air defense had been activated. On the other side, Russia has claimed that it has destroyed a Patriot system and a British Storm Shadow cruise missile fired by Ukraine. The Russian Ministry of Defense said its air defense force has also intercepted multiple rockets fired by the US-made Hippocampus rocket launcher system, including the HAM anti-radiation missile. Russia's resumption of strikes on Kiev earlier this month came after a lull of over 50 days, and the much-anticipated counteroffensive promised by Ukraine is still in the making. A mortar unit of an elite infantry brigade is being prepared under the beating Nissan of southern Ukraine for a counter-offensive that could define the country's future. In the meantime, let's also listen in to what Russia's defense ministry has to say.
Сегодня ночью вооруженные силы Российской Федерации
Tonight, the armed forces of the Russian Federation launched a concentrated strike with a long-range air and sea-based high-precision weapons at the point of deployment of the armed forces of Ukraine,
а также местам хранения боеприпасов, вооружения,
as well as at the places of storage of ammunition, weapons and military equipment delivered from the Western countries.
объекты поражены. Высокоточным ударом гиперзвуковым ракетным комплексом «Кинжал»
The purpose of the airstrike was achieved. All assigned objects are hit. A high-precision strike by a hypersonic missile system Dagger in the city of Kyiv, a US-made Patriot anti-aircraft missile system was hit.
подразделения южной группировки войск сдерживали противника,
You
прикрывая
can
фланги
see
штурмовых
the
отрядов.
situation remains tense both in Russia and in Ukraine. On that note, let me quickly go back to Mr. Lang. Mr. Lang, if you heard what was just happening, especially as far as the statement coming from Russia's defense ministry is concerned, let's take into consideration the diplomatic and military support that the US has already provided Ukraine in this war. Many are now wondering if Beijing can manage another diplomatic win without Washington, that too at a time when its relations with Washington are at an all-time low.
Well, no peace can be possible without the involvement of the United States. Don't forget that this is a proxy war fed by the United States. The United States is the leader of the NATO alliance and is the biggest contributor of arms to Ukraine. So if the United States doesn't want the war to stop, the war will not stop. Okay, full stop. So the fact that even President Biden and the Biden administration is also suggesting that China could play a role, suggests that even the United States want the war to at least come to a temporary pause. Because as I said, the war is now causing inflation and the United States having to increase interest rates to arrest inflation. And that's bad for the economy and bad for the coming presidential election.
Right. All right. Mr. Lung, are current Chinese efforts an indication that EU is ready to segregate its relationship with China vis-a-vis the United States, something that was also admitted by the French president when he met the Chinese president along with the EU chief? Macron, in an interview to Politico, even said that Europe should not get dragged into a US-China confrontation over Taiwan.
It's not in politics, especially in international politics, it's not just black and white. I always said to my interlocutors, I like the French painting Monet rather than Caravaggio. Caravaggio is always in black and white. Monet is much more subtle. It's just like international politics. So the EU is by no means or not on the side of China, but the EU likewise doesn't want the war to carry on indefinitely. As I said, many European countries and NATO countries in Europe, they're suffering. The people are suffering from high inflation, and the economy is also being rattled. So they don't want the war to continue indefinitely. And also, some European, or I should say most European countries, are running out of ammunition. And they, with all the promises of tanks and all that, the actual delivery falls far short. So I don't think that the many European countries want the war to carry on indefinitely. But that doesn't mean that they want to be on the side of China. But they want China to play a useful role.
Right.
Bearing in mind China's close relationship with Russia.
Mr. Lang, last but not the least, why is China looking to play global peacemaker and also looking to gain prominence in Eastern Europe?
Well, because China's role is, because of the China size of the economy, is the second largest in the world. And then given time is likely to become the world's biggest. And along with the international gravitas, it comes the kind of soft power, the kind of respect China expects the world would be able to give it. But of course, the whole world is against most of the Western countries against China, coming as it is from a different regime, a different culture. But then if China succeeds in brokering peace, as it had in brokering peace in the Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia, then naturally it will increase China's soft power and the attractiveness of China as a nation.
All right. On that note, many thanks to you, Mr. Lung, for sharing your precious inputs on that news story.